I'm a big fan of the circular economy, trying to find use for every single aspect of waste.
Welcome to Green Planet, Blue Planet podcast. I'm here today with Tonthoza Uganja. Welcome, Tonthoza.
Hi, how are you?
Yeah, really good. I'm excited for this conversation about land restoration. You're a startup founder. You have a team of, I think, 10 people with you in Malawi, Africa. You're in Wales as we're having this conversation.
I am.
Let's get to know you a little bit first. So, what brought you to Wales and when did you start the land restoration project?
So I started my our organization in 2019. I had just finished my master's by distance learning here in Wales, actually through Bangor University. I'm here back again, but I'm doing my PhD. Basically modeling forest landscape restoration for enhanced farming livelihoods and ecosystems. So basically, it's so much aligned with my project back home. It's about enhancing the sustainability of forest dependent communities and their landscapes.
Right on. And when you say forest dependent communities, take us to Malawi for a few minutes here. I don't think everyone has been. I haven't been, and so I'd love to just kind of, can you paint us a picture of what's really most important and most valuable to people on the ground?
So we are predominantly a very agri-based economy. Malawi is supported for its food security. It's supported by millions of smallholder farmers, rural smallholder farmers. We grow our own food. We farm for our livelihoods, and basically the biggest source of income for most of our farmers is farming. And based on that, uh, apart from the fact that one third of the country is a lake, the biggest chunk of land in Malawi is basically for agricultural produce, and it now becomes imperative to balance the production needs of the country with its conservation needs in terms of biodiversity, forests, and other natural resources.
Right. And so when you started the project, and you said a few years ago, 2019, what was kind of like, just walk us through, like, what was the beginning like, and then how, yeah, how did you grow to 10 people so quick?
Well, so I think for you to understand why I started SFS, I need to go back to a bit of my upbringing. I grew up in a smallholder farming family. My grandparents were smallholder farmers, my grandmother a teacher. But because I grew up with most of my life, I grew up with them. I ended up understanding a lot about smallholder farming, and I love plants. My grandfather used to love growing trees a lot. So I decided to study forestry. And because of that, my passion grew from there. But apart from that, after graduating, I ended up working with smallholder farming farmers as well, because basically Malawi's other economy driver is tobacco. So most of the farmers farm tobacco a lot. And because of that, I ended up working with a lot of smallholder farming farmers, and I was trying to complement their um, balance sustainable crop production with forestry. So basically, trying to find some sort of environmental sustainability so that their farmlands remain regenerative, so they can produce to the most, they can become as highly productive as possible. So coming from that background, and I've worked with smallholder farmers for over 10 years, I then decided, okay, there's much more I can do here. I started looking at designing models that were very much led by the communities themselves, because in right now in sub-Saharan Africa, everybody's trying to plant trees. They're trying to put trees on the ground. But imagine a farmer whose need is to feed his family. Tree
Hmm.
planting becomes a long-term investment
Right.
decision that is not usually going to be prioritized. So I thought to myself, what value can I bring to the farmer to make them understand that for their own enhanced productivity, they need to have trees on their farms. Because as a forester, as an agroforestry practitioner, as the project manager, I understand as a technical specialist that there's so much benefits to agroforestry, to putting trees on farms and that. And then I decided to say, you know what, I need to design a project that actually comes from the grassroots people themselves, something that feeds into their indigenous knowledge, attaches it to their livelihoods and to their plans as well, so that it becomes something they are willing to take on without much effort. Because lots of people are planting trees, but the survival is not there. Lots of money is spent. There's so much cost that is associated with tree planting, especially in Africa right now. But do we really can we really account for the trees that have been planted with all these massive tree planting campaigns? So with that in mind, I decided to design an approach that uh, would build on community ownership and allow these smallholder farming communities that are mostly forest dependent in Malawi to design their reality as they see fit, but in so doing, enhance their livelihoods, but become more environmentally sustainable and regenerate their farmlands in the process.
Mm. And create, yeah, like a regenerative approach to land, right? Because you're striking on a very interesting topic there, Tonthoza, which is like the maybe singular focused effort to planting trees, right? Just to get more trees in the ground and carbon drawdown and all of that, and that's a great buzzword, and I think it's important to a degree. But if it's just trees with massive costs, it kind of bypasses the reality of many people who are dependent on the land. And also, I guess, something that becomes more visible for all of us who are into regeneration, into regenerative agriculture, into the idea of drawdown and carbon back into the soil. I think it's really important that we talk about the diversity of what we're planting, so that the ecosystem and the bioregional health is actually restored, and somebody who lives on the ground is in stewardship of that, right? And so that's what it sounds like you were really or you are really designing these projects. Are there some stories you can share? Like, are there some success stories of like how it has already impacted people's lives? Or because you're right, like you started 4 years ago, and trees are definitely a long-term investment, right?
So yes, so I needed to add a bit more complexity to this whole scenario. So imagine there's also this need to 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 actually produce, and yet the population of the country is growing, and because of that comes with issues of uh, you not having enough land holding capacity to produce your own needs. So, with that in mind, there are then other farmers that have are within landscapes that have indigenous trees within them. So, so one of the success stories is a group of women farmers we started with. So we were also intentional. We started because we were women. Our team is a very female-led team. So it's we decided to spearhead a campaign that starts with women themselves. So we decided to start organizing these women farmers in these farming groups. We call them restoration teams, and within these teams we sat down and designed. We trained them on set. We built the capacity in the ways we could, but we also listened to them. We called it an ecosystem discovery process. And then by doing so, we learned that the species, as a specialist, I would know which species would do well geographically, obviously. But then we understood within them which ones they preferred, which ones they would wanted enhanced, and which ones were profitable to them. We then understood the dynamics between how they use their resources within that communities, especially the forest resources. And then by doing so, we actually started working with the communities themselves to restore what they needed restored for the betterment of their community. And with that, we just added value by giving them training towards activities like beekeeping. When they started farmer managed natural regeneration, they started just enhancing their own woodlands, natural woodlands. And by putting bees on on their woodlands, they gained an extra income. and we just found them sustainable markets for that produce. And in so doing, they had an extra income, but but also they were able to restore their own woodlands. It's not a one of the biggest issues that we're encountering is that this is not something that's going to change in a day. It's been th- it's been over 3 years for us, but these are projects that are going to to become, their impact is going to be realized over time. But at the same time, because people are seeing the changes, the small incremental significant small changes within communities, we ended up cultivating more people within more other communities who were seeing what was happening with the other communities within them. So essentially our route to recruiting more farmers within our portfolio just became a word of mouth sort of initiative. They were like, oh, we want you to do the same thing you did with that particular community. So it became something that can be passed on. The whole essence of it all is that it communities become self-sustaining to the extent that they can teach themselves how to become more resilient to this changing climate, but also they can understand that they have access to resources that most smallholder rural farmers in Malawi don't have. We're talking about inadequate extension services, lack of input finance, but mostly lack of um, uh, access to policy issues that would, in some way, help build the communities on their own.
Yeah, it's very interesting that you're saying that like communities then start to inspire each other, right? By those small incremental changes. And you know, when we talk about bioregional health or, autonomous groups of people, I think this is something that maybe even 10 years ago was completely underestimated, right? Like this approach over the last decades was always, what's the global direction? What's the globalized economy going to look like? And how can we create these programs and these like pots of funding for let's say for places in the global south to help development. But really the best development comes bottom up, grassroots, when people can provide food for themselves, their families, their communities, and also have that, what you're bringing to them, this like long-term perspective of also creating increased soil health, increased health for waterways, because in that way you basically become autonomous to any global economical trend, right? And suddenly your local community is thriving again. And it it kind of sounds like a no-brainer between you and I when we talk about it this way, but it's just not being the state of the world. And at large, kind of the direction was quite another one. But we're in a time of change. We're in what I would call the regenerative movement, or the regenaissance. And so you also got accepted into a an accelerator. Is that right? Called Restoration Champions, and there's a cohort basically, yeah, for all of Africa. So do you know how many other projects are in there? Like, is it does it span all of the countries in Africa, or?
No, so they choose 100 entrepreneurs every year from the whole of Africa.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Cool. And
people
so
have.
you're in the application right now, or
No,
you
we
already made it
actually
in?
graduated, we finished, and the working through that land accelerator, it actually helped us a lot because it put us into perspective. Look, I wasn't an entrepreneur. I was somebody passionate about land restoration, someone passionate about um, helping communities that I came from. But you know, when you actually add that with actual experience with uh, understanding the circular economy, understanding development as it comes from the business perspective and sustainability as a whole, it actually shapes uh, what your targets are, what your key performance indicators are, and how you can actually help you. It actually helps you shape what sort of path you want to take. For instance, uh, we were just talking with my team about how we are very hands-on with the communities we work with, and maybe our impact is not shown right away. There are other things we're doing that are very visible right away, but because it's something that comes from the communities themselves, it's it takes root. It's about behavioral change. So because of that sort of model, it doesn't scale as fast as everybody wants to, but eventually when it takes off, it takes it becomes such consistent and powerful change, because it becomes an impact to it comes from the grassroots people themselves. I think that's what we need right now. We are talking about a lot of help. There's a lot of loss and damage. Malawi just got hit by Cyclone Freddy, and you could see how just a little bit of tree cover could have actually helped build shelters for people in this calamity. But it's not something no one could control. It's Mother Nature telling us that we really need to get back to understanding what the planet needs. And in order for us to sustain our own well-being, it, lots of health issues arising from that. But at the same time, if people themselves understand, if as much as we want to help, you don't impose change on people, but if it comes from them, it has to be, we have to reach a middle ground where um, perspectives come together, so that to deliver for the earth itself. Because even if you impose something on people, it doesn't just happen. Actually, there's a semblance of, oh yes, we've planted trees, just like also all these projects too, we've planted trees, but where are the trees? How many trees have been planted in Africa? Let's look at all the tree planting organizations that we know, but how many of them are surviving, and why are we still saying there's a loss in tree cover if we've
Mm.
planted as much trees?
Yeah, and really getting like the local communities fully involved into it, right? Like, I mean, this has been, I guess, part of the whole kind of charity circuit for the last decades, right? Is like investments go into the global south, but they don't actually empower local communities or local people to become, stewards and leaders in a way that they become autonomous, right? And so, I think a big part of where we're at in 2023 is that no matter where in the world, like we want, again, we said it earlier, like really strong bioregional communities that leads to bioregional health, that leads to soil health, that leads to water health, that leads to people living definitely above the poverty line, but ideally living in a thriving way because they can provide for themselves and each other. How do you see all this now being abroad for the time being as you're studying and completing that in Wales? Like, is it difficult to, like, let's just ask this question, like, is it difficult to run a project that's really ground up and grassroots from overseas, or are you just really blessed and lucky with a team of people?
I am blessed and lucky, but you're right. I've been used to being on the ground for so long, and of course,
Mm,
I go to visit when it comes to it. But one of the things I've also realized that is very important is this outside partnerships that I'm able to cultivate, the new learnings. I'm calling them learnings, new knowledge that I'm looking at different experiences and how to design approaches better, and also to use the network around me to help to actually help my team to thrive. Because one of the other challenges we're facing is literally lack of access to resources. So because of that, getting to know what other people do, how they solve that particular problem helps. It kind of puts me in a space where I'm able to translate what goes on the ground to all this there are so many resources out there. If you ask me, so many published works, so many projects that are working on almost similar problems, of course, but in different landscapes and geographies. But within that scope, I, I have that opportunity to learn, to gather knowledge, and to use a network in order to help my team on the ground. And that is all we need, in fact, in this time, because we need to gather as much collaborations and partnerships and networks as possible so that we can deliver for the earth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's hear a little bit more about how you see a certain certain topics. I'd love to ask you a few questions, Tonthoza. One of them being purpose, and like maybe in your own words, like how would you define purpose, and how did you just know? I mean, you said it a little bit. It was like already the family story and how you grew up, but how did you know that this is your purpose and that's where you want to step in?
I don't know. I would call myself lucky because from such a young age, I've just been involved. I love science. I've always loved science because it's a proven way. It gives you a sure way. You ask a question, you get an answer. But then I love the multidisciplinary of the social sciences and other development related topics. And if you combine all of this, it's usually something that becomes profound to a specific group of people, but also maybe to the planet. I've also loved how the earth feeds us. I used to love picking mushrooms, as simple as that. It used to be a delicacy for me. We've got very local mushrooms, a very specific species of local mushrooms in Malawi. So I've just always loved forestry and trees, and I thought, how can I put this passion to use for the people and for the planet? And I got the answer. It didn't come easy. And also there were times I really did think maybe sustainable farming solutions is not gonna work. Maybe I should give up. But then I remembered the people I'm working with. I remembered the reason why I'm doing it and who it's meant to help. And then I kept pushing and I'll keep pushing. There's 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 a long road for us ahead, but it's worth it.
Hmm. Yeah, there is a long road ahead for us. I'd love to ask you something about money and funding and regenerative kind of approach because there's I guess we're through the first few waves of cryptocurrency and the kind of the crypto the hope of crypto, but we also know that there's possibly like a whole future still waiting for us with blockchain technology, with DAOs, with decentralized autonomous organizations, and when we talk about bioregional health, I can't help but think, what if different bioregions had different ways to trade, tokens, or had their own tokenomic structure, or had their own kind of way of just passing on value? Is that a topic at all for you in Malawi, or is that something that
It
you
is
have an eye
actually.
on?
I
Like, yeah.
remember. I'm also a co-founder for this just very. It's a very new startup. It's called Africa Bunpe, trying to tokenize carbon credits as well for direct benefits to the community. And as you know, carbon credits have, especially the voluntary carbon market, has become a bit shaky. But I'm thinking one of the reasons is because there's no really sure way to know whether it's actually benefiting the communities that it's meant to benefit, but also it can be a useful tool, especially for communities like these that want to see value in restoring their farmlands, because you're talking about someone who wants to sustain their livelihoods. They don't have a means to do so other than the land that they are farming. So if there is a balance between making sure that there are ecosystem services that can pay for that service, for that restoration opportunity, but it benefits the communities directly, then yes, I would like to see approaches that are designed towards that, and methodologies that work, and assurances that these benefits will go directly to these communities so that they actually do the work, they make impact in the way it's supposed to be intended. But yeah, I've because the funding restoration projects is a challenge, and I've found it very challenging in terms of sustainable farming solutions as well. Um, and I've been trying to brainstorm with my team on the best ways to finance that, and looking at the voluntary carbon markets as an option for scaled restoration opportunities, because our communities are big, our communities uh, are differentiated, but maybe if we find value for them in that aspect, it can work. but also we are also trying to enable the ecosystem, the communities themselves, to build small businesses within themselves. So capacity building doesn't just come through restoration, but through sustainable activities within the communities themselves. Trying to finance agroforestry produce like honey production, other value chains within the communities that are done in a sustainable manner, so that we can leverage those opportunities for the communities. And that is why we work in partnership with agro processing companies, other agencies and stuff. But yes, it is a challenge. But as I said, we are always looking for collaborations, partnerships, or even donations that would help um, our communities grow and become more sustainable and self-sustaining.
Yeah, brilliant. And let's make sure that we link out to your project so anybody can get in touch as well. And if there is some help that's out in our shared community, like let's get that lined up. I have a question for you around just the time being right now. We're recording this in early 2023. What is most required in Malawi specifically right now for this kind of project, your project, and the communities that are impacted by it? What is most required for people on the ground? And like, um, you just use the word capacity building. Like, what can we? Yeah, how can we picture that? Because everybody who lives outside of Malawi probably doesn't have a picture.
Okay, so capacity building in this case doesn't just mean going into the communities and training them. You can do this, no. But there's this thing I like to say, show and tell. You tell somebody, yes, you can produce honey. This is how you process it. This is how you package it sustainably, and this is how you market it. And that is why as sustainable farming solutions, we are providing access to sustainable markets, access to extension services, and access to input financing for them through partnerships, obviously, so that they get that all-rounded opportunity to grow as communities themselves. What happens if sustainable farming solutions is no longer providing that support? That's the biggest question. Lots of organizations come in and pour their resources, but as soon as they leave, that's what we've seen historically. As soon as they leave, that whole project stops, and then they are back to square one. And that's what we don't want as sustainable farming solutions. We want to make sure that even without us, these communities are going to be sustained, and they're going to be building their ecosystems, healing their earth, and making sure that it provides for future generations to come.
Yeah, that's a cool segue. Future generations to come. My next question is actually about future generations. If you were to, change or innovate the education system, Tonthoza, what would you do so that future generations are better equipped to actually, deal with what's waiting out there in the world?
I think what we're doing with SFS at the moment, starting at the grassroots level, helping, working hand in hand with communities to build, is quite necessary, especially introducing conservation in terms of restorative production. I'm calling it restorative production because people always talk about, let's conserve this species, let's conserve this ecosystem, but they don't understand that for such communities, it comes hand in hand with production to feed their families, to maintain their day-to-day lives. So I'm saying building restorative productive capacity for these communities so that it becomes ingrained at that level even before a child goes to school, because by making sure that the women we're training are empowered, we know that they will pass on this knowledge to their kids, they will pass on this knowledge to other community members, and in so doing, it cascades into, it scales into a program that can be innovated in so many communities and grow at scale.
Yeah, yeah, beautiful. I have another question for you, and we've seen this in the whole world, especially in the oceans. It becomes very visible. It's about trash and garbage, and so I think big level, like, what is garbage or trash to you? How do you kind of digest that topic?
I'm a big fan of the circular economy, trying to find use for every single aspect of waste. For instance, I usually enjoy just looking at what other innovative projects within the same communities we work with are doing. And that's why I said we love leveraging on partnerships. If there's a waste collection company, what are they doing with them? There are some making shoes with plastics. I've seen others trying to buy the work they produce biogas for cooking and others. Just making sure that all the waste is utilized to bring more value to the communities. That's what I believe in. I believe in making use of everything so it doesn't become destructive. It doesn't impede other life growth. By life, I don't just mean people, but in the oceans, we're talking about fish species, other algae. All these things are interdependent. So for us to exist, we need to make sure that the organisms that exist with us are also
Hmm.
existing.
Yeah. And then how is the situation on the ground in, let's say, specifically Malawi? Because everywhere in the world, I think where we go now, there's just like it's just it seems like the old systems of recycling and upcycling they're just not suffice, right? And then people, including in places like Canada or Germany, lack the education to fully take care of their own garbage. How is this in a place that's kind of run by local communities? Do
To be
people actually understand that like garbage doesn't belong on the ground, or like what's the truth there right now?
Traditionally, like waste has always been something they would burn or bury. But I'm always talking about Malawi or Africa as a growing economy. There's so much potential there, and you can see the young people innovating, young people bringing up all of this. I mean, it's amazing that when you start an organization, you start seeing other people that are innovating in the same space, and you start understanding that I think there is potential here, there is growth here, there is something that with this the way we live in this world right now, there's access to a lot of information. Of course, for smallholder, like for rural communities like the ones we work with, that access is limited, and that's why when we see innovators in the same space as us doing something for 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 the circular economy, we are happy. We are pleasantly not surprised, but pleasantly um, assured that there's progress. Something is going to happen. It's a growing economy, and it's going to change, but it takes a lot of innovation, it takes a lot of learning, it also takes a lot of understanding.
It does, and but you're saying something so beautiful, right? It's a growing economy, and it still takes a lot of steps to be taken everywhere in the world. Actually, when we talk garbage or pollution, um, and yeah, everything in one way or other, will stay on the planet. And so, if it doesn't biodegrade within a few weeks, we should probably use it for something else. But you also said that it is changing, and I think this is the beautiful kind of through line, or the red thread into a positive future and a future of a healthy planet with healthy people on it, is that a lot of the ways we're doing things in the world are changing. Maybe it's because of the kind of post information age we're in, where you can find information about anything online if you just look properly, or maybe it's because just the right people get activated. But it seems to me, just like you said, it's things are changing, and not everything is gold right away, but we're actually creating a more healthy planet with projects like yours, and with initiatives like yours. Before we wrap this episode, Tonthoza, I'd love to know your dream for the future generations to come. Like, we're here in a very interesting time on planet Earth, a very interesting kind of cleanup mission, restructuring, to what we said, bioregional health, autonomous, like um, groups of people in no matter where in the world. What's your, if you were to zoom out on a legacy level, like 7 generations that inherit the earth from us one day, what's your dream for the planet Earth in that context?
I think we have a great opportunity and um, challenge to shape uh, the future generations in the sense that we now have a huge job to do, and that is to grow responsible citizens. By growing responsible citizens, I mean um, we we have to really make sure that we bridge this great divide, this gap in information, so that everybody can have access to it, so they know the ramifications. Because if some society or some community is held back by just lack of access to information, or lack of access to a vital resource, it becomes uh, it becomes a problem for them to learn about something and to understand why the implications of that. Because, for instance, right now in Africa is experiencing a lot of climate shocks, droughts, floods, a lot of them. But Africa is the least industrialized continent in the whole world. So, as much as you would say, this does not concern me, eventually it concerns everyone. And at this level, if we do not grow responsible citizens, as in everyone becomes responsible for what what they can control, it's it's important that we become more responsible. So for the for us now, it's going to be a great job to do, to set the foundations for very responsible future generations. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what you started doing with sustainable farming solutions and empowering farmers to restore and conserve their ecosystems, right? So, thank you so much for the work you do in the world, and let's stay in touch and kind of keep an eye on this beautiful project. When are you going back to Malawi? When is your PhD and all of that wrapped
No,
up?
I'm going
Yeah.
back to Africa in May.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and hopefully I'll be in Malawi in October. But in May, but
By
I'll
October.
be
Yeah.
in Malawi between June, July, August, somewhere there.
Beautiful. Well, all the best on your journey.
Thank
Super excited for this interview and to share it with people out there. Thank you, Tonthoza.
thank you.